now we move on to the next speaker, and the talk is titled "You Only Write Thrice." A lot of us are, waiting to hear your views. So, what do you?
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me and see my slides. Okay, thank you. So hello, everybody. I'm Kacper, and in this talk, I'll show you our idea for an end-to-end transparent publishing workflow, which makes the entire process easier for academics. Let's have a look at the current publishing process. So these are two articles which were published more than a century apart. On the left, the one was just printed out on a piece of paper. The one on the right is a PDF. If you start thinking about it, there's not really much difference between the two. The major one is that PDFs you can just copy freely and send around, whereas paperbacks, you actually need to print them out and then go over to the post office and ship them. But other than that, there's not really much difference. The formats have pretty much the same limitations when it comes to content. So there are some ideas in the community which allow us to do something better. And one of these you've already seen probably quite a few times. This is distill.pub, which allows you to publish interactive articles. So here you can have interactive visualizations where you can explore the research by yourself. It also has a few facilities like better citations, etc. What else? Well, publishing is not just reading articles, it's also reviewing and revising. So when it comes to reviewing, we have open review, which improves on the publishing side of things. And here you can basically have a review which is more of a conversation, which is more natural to humans. Then there is also an initiative which some of you may know called the Open Journals, where you submit a paper as a markdown file in a GitHub repository, and then the review happens in a GitHub issue. So all of the reviewer comments and the paper revisions are clearly visible, and there is a provenance for your paper and for the review. And once the paper gets accepted, the issue gets closed. So far, so good, but there are a few issues with this. So one is that these are separate tools, which are standalone, and you can't really have an integrated workflow. Which means that the steps of to be done in separate platforms. There's also another problem, which is format multiplicity. And you've probably come across this so many times. The paper itself, probably a presentation for your talk, maybe a poster, a promotional video, some press release, a blog post. You publish source code, but then also some computational examples and God knows what else. But then there are also artifacts which are not included in the main workflow. And these are reviews, revisions of your papers, and different versions of the paper. What is more, depending on the format, you can use different sources. So for example, some of the files may be written in LaTeX, other things may be written in Google Docs. Then you may have some HTML or Markdown, maybe PowerPoint, some code snippets, or even Jupyter notebooks. What do you do with all of that? Well, you may actually get into a problem of having them out of sync, which means you have to actually copy content from one to the other. And then you have so many different versions and you don't know which one is the latest. What do you do next? And another issue when it comes to multiple formats is that if you want to use a single artifact in all of them, you probably need to go to the lowest common denominator. And an example of that I recently came across was including equations in Google slideshow, where I actually had to generate JPEGs from my LaTeX equations in order to include them, which basically means that I can't edit them anymore. And any sort of even slight change requires me to go through the entire workflow one more time. And coming to think of it, there has to be a better way, which doesn't require you to know all of the web technologies and all of the latest advances in the field of publishing. And what we did, we took a few open source tools and put them together. And all of this allows you to write your content once as mist markdown. This is a flavor of markdown that allows you to include a lot of scientific content and then generate 3 different formats out of it. So one is computational narrative with Jupyter notebooks, which you can run on Google Colab or MyBinder. Then interactive slides like this ones with reveal.js, but also documents, books, and reports with Jupyter Book. We have all of this in a version controlled environment, which allows us to keep track of the history. And this is done usually with Git, but you can also use Mercurial or whatever other version control you use. When it comes to reviewing, you can use the software review infrastructure to this end. So all of the issues and pull requests available on GitHub, you can use that as, without developing anything extra. And here to the right, you can see that this review in this way, reviewing articles in this way, it feels a bit more natural to humans, just because it's a bit more conversation-like. You can attach comments to individual sentences in the paper or lines. Whenever the author addresses your comment in the rebuttal or while reviewing the article before publishing, you can see the actual change without going through the entire paper one more time and trying to figure out attached to the paper itself, which means that there's a record of where the paper was submitted and what edits were made and when, all the resubmission history of your article. For publishing, if you follow on from the software engineering point of view, it's as simple as just tagging a version of your article and then archiving it on a platform of your choice. For bibliometrics, you can use the standard citations here because it's all digital. You can mint digital object identifiers with platforms such as Zenodo, but you can also go one step further and use more advanced analytic tools such as Google Analytics. And this would allow you to track where people come from when reading your article and also where they go next. For presenting, as I said, you have 3 formats from a single source, which is always in sync because it's just one. But you also can get native interactivity in your content. And I'll show you that in a moment. There's also improved accessibility because all of the stuff happens in the browser, so you don't need to install any stuff on your own machine. So you can do it on mobile devices or wherever, use your friend's computer or whatever. But also you can use assistive technologies that are quite common on the web to browse this content. And in the end, web technologies are the limit here. So here, just to show you, this is an interactive plot embedded directly in the slide. So then you can show the audience how it changes as you go with your talk. So what's the way forward? Here we use Jupyter Book infrastructure, but it's all based on plugins. And you can imagine that LaTeX would not be as powerful as it is without myriad of plugins that you use to produce your content. And here, since it's quite early stage development, we probably need to invest in developing more plugins. So when we were doing some other research, we were actually, as we went, we developed some plugins here. And we managed to support non-mainstream programming languages like SWI Prolog or CPLint, have special content blocks like exercises and solutions, and also have custom code syntax highlighting. Here we use to adapt this workflow, we probably need to develop a bespoke publishing platform because as it stands, GitHub does not support anonymous reviews, which may be a problem. But also, if we decide to develop our own platform, we can prioritize features that we see necessary or useful as opposed to, use a commercial product. Another problem are compute resources, because if the content is to be interactive, it has to be executed somewhere. And how do we get hold of enough compute to support this infrastructure? Some of these issues we are exploring in the Taylor project, which is a Horizon 2020 ICT 48 European AI Excellence Center. And we look here at new ways of working and AI-powered collaboration and research tools. So I encourage you to look out for more content coming out of this project. This paper was, there was an exhibit associated with this paper and source code of which you can view under this URL. all of the publishing is automatic. So there's a workflow GitHub action set up to build the content every time you edit your source documents. And all of this gets published as a GitHub page. So you just submit your changes and the rest happens automatically. You can browse the build content under this URL. And this basically includes some code snippets, executed visualizations, but also built presentations out of this content. So this is a presentation embedded in a presentation, just to show you what is possible. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions during the panel at the end.
Thanks so much. And this looks really cool, especially thanks for the exhibit and open sourcing your workflow. And unfortunately, we're going to have to defer all the questions to the postal session because we're running a bit behind on time.